Good morning. Hello and welcome to the Future of Media, a digitized events, pardon me, by Arena Events. Thank you so much for choosing to spend the next hour with us, wherever you are, whether you're streaming on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, on the Financial Mail, Red Zone, Times Live, or Arena Events platforms. It really means a lot that you decided to join us this morning. I hope you feel connected and together in this upcoming conversation. And thank you so much, I have to say, for joining me at home, okay? I would have never thought that I'd be welcoming you to an event of this kind from my house. So my name is Siya Sangweni. I am the brand manager of cliffcentral.com and the executive producer and co-host of the Gareth Cliff Show, and so excited to be the moderator for this conversation this morning. Look, I hope you've been keeping up with the digital series with the theme Paradigm Shift. And we came to this because of how people are consuming media and engaging with advertising so differently in this rapidly changing world we're now living in. And similarly, seeing how both media and brand owners are now having to evolve their approach and recognizing the paradigm shift that is taking place, and that being the driving force behind this digitized series. So we couldn't have something like this happen if it wasn't for our partners as well. So thank you to Vodacom for making it happen, as well as EziAds, Everlytic, Proudly SA, the Media Shop and WAN-IFRA. So today's topic is all about energizing our biggest brand, which is South Africa. Quite timely right now, isn't it? So think about it. It was just a couple of months ago, but right now feels like a whole entire lifetime ago, when 2019 was just a glory year for South Africa. Right now, we might feel like daily news makes us feel very doom and gloom, but you know, we had a good year. 2019 was amazing. We had a great rugby win for the Springboks. We had Zozibi Ntunzi being crowned Miss Universe. We had the Ndlovu Youth Choir enthrall us all on the America's Got Talent stage. And do you even remember, this will really make you feel good today, do you even remember that Cape Town petrol attendant, his name is Nkosi Kombele, who all just crept into our hearts when he lent a customer 100 rands just so that she can fill her car up because she didn't have any money on her. So think about all of those moments. And I'm sure you can agree that there's one thing that unites us all. And even just as power players, either in the media world or agency or brands, we really do unite with these good causes, and we're energized by this. South Africa, really our biggest asset. So what I hope you get to understand, and what I hope we get to the bottom of this morning, is to explore the opportunities that the South African environment offers for advertisers and brands as a whole, as well as to get some tips and tricks to use the news to improve your company from the bottom line. And so we'll do that in two parts this morning. First, we're going to have a panel discussion with some of my favorite people that we've put together, our esteemed panel. And then we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the hour as well. If you have any questions, you can just submit them through the live chat on Zoom. And also maybe if it weaves into the conversation, I'll be able to bring them up organically. So let's get straight into it. Firstly, I'd just like to say that Matelana Ngobeni, the digital manager of Brand South Africa, is unable to join us this morning. She's definitely going to be missed, but in moving on, we have Happy Makumalongiti. She is a passionate marketing communications and PR professional with a background in business and social entrepreneurship. She joined Proudly South African back in 2015 to head up the organization's marketing and communications department. So good morning, Happy. Happy, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. So I want to start off with you by saying my mother always taught me to be very courteous to guests in my home. So since we're like equally in each other's homes, I feel like I need to offer you, like, are you sitting comfortably? May I make you some tea? May I make you some coffee? Something.
I am sitting comfortably, and you've outdone yourself because you've offered me good locally made coffee
Thank
in
you.
a branded cup. So good for you. You're on the right track. You and
Great.
I are in.
Next on our panel is
Awesome.
awesome. Next on our panel is a woman who I somewhat blame for slow moving traffic in our country, because you're probably minding your own business, driving on the road, and you see a headline from her publication and you want to take it all in. You need to actually slow down to read it all because it's drawn you in so much. It's Nwabisa Makunga. Good morning, Nwabisa. You're the editor of The Sowetan, a journalist for the last 16 years and having extensively covered South African politics and business, and you're really passionate about developmental leadership. How are you?
I'm good. Sorry, I had to laugh at that. I'm sorry. I really hope that nobody has actually had an accident because of that. But yeah, thank you so much.
We're all safe, but I'm just saying I can speak from personal experience. You're doing good work. And then Jean Pinard, how are you?
Good morning, Siya. I'm well. How are you?
Awesome, thank you. You're the co-founder of Apex Media. You founded that in 2010 after receiving a diploma of music in contemporary music and sound engineering from the campus of Performing Arts in association with the Academy of Contemporary Music in London. All very fanciful stuff, where you were also awarded the Student of the Year for 2 consecutive years. Look, no pressure now, but the bar has been set with your accolades as to your input this morning.
And by the rest of the panel, by the looks of things, Siya.
Exactly. And then last but definitely not least is one of the most genuine and warmest people I have the pleasure of knowing. Kind seems to be an overused term nowadays, so I will rather be very unique and say Brent Lindeque lives his life with a heart wide open. Brent Lindeque is the Good Things guy, and he started as well the online good news site, which really was born out of the simple idea of trying to better one person's day every single day. Brent, how are you?
Really, really good. Obviously, I find myself in a different position in South Africa because I'm constantly bombarded with good news. So I've always got the smile on my face because I've pretty much got the best job in the country.
I have to say, though, as I was thinking back to how long we've known each other, I think we easily met 6 years ago at cliffcentral.com. And that was just, I think you were coming out of a frosted tip hair phase, and I had an afro that could rival Diana Ross. So that wasn't a good time, but we're going to focus on good things rather in the future. So look, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into this conversation. Brent, I want to start off with you, with our theme this morning. You've built your brand very strategically through using media. What is the effect of media, in your opinion, on our country?
Yeah, look, media plays one of the biggest roles because whether you consciously or subconsciously are reading articles or engrossing yourselves in news, it's all around us, and it's what we speak about. It's what we're talking about at our dinner tables or with our colleagues or at the water coolers, and without knowing it, the media affects our state of mind, and it really does. It creates our perspective of where the country is. And you speak about the fact that Good Things Guy was born 5 or 6 years ago. The reason why I created at first the Facebook page and then into the blog and then into the news site was because at the time I found that there was no balance in the news. And that's okay. News has to be what it is. We need to be telling the things that are real. People need to know what is going on in the country. But if we're only filling our minds with this realness, it can seem quite scary and quite overwhelming. And the problem with that is then the perspective that we have of what is going on in our country, wherever that country is. Now we're speaking about South Africa. It can be quite tarnished. And we start to think that we don't live in a place where we can be proudly South African, or where there is hope, or where we can feel good about the day that we've just had. And the strangest thing has happened. Since the beginning of that, it seems that everybody's on the same page now. And the good news is everywhere you look. If you open whatever publication it is, there's always a good news story there somewhere. And I think that's important. So media plays a huge part in what our perspective is and our own idea of where we are. But a balanced media, one that has got both the hard-hitting facts and the hard-hitting news and a little bit of sunshine and hope, it gives us sunshine and hope. And that makes our worlds a little bit easier to live in.
Yeah. Jean, in your opinion, which countries have gotten it right with keeping an eye on what is happening in terms of the news landscape and using that in good, upbeat, and worthwhile marketing? And then how do we as South Africa, or rather, how can we as South Africa learn and adapt from those countries?
Thanks, Siya. So I think when we talk about doing things right, we need to have a little bit of context around what that means. So let's take for a second the general commitment to execution we see in these countries that get it right. There's a wonderful project by Google Arts and Culture called Open Heritage that archives and explores heritage sites across the world. Having started in North America, a project like that not only creates access, but it creates a kind of digital equality that's really easily marketable. Add to that the fact that the scalability for these kinds of digital experiences work twofold. First, as the marketing tool, but secondly, as a piece of sort of utility educational content. So what they seem to do right is that they're citizen-centric, whether they're putting climate at the forefront or they're putting the 4-day work week or artificial intelligence as the next great smart city in Dubai. And they seem to leverage tech around these narratives, right? So they embrace disruption better. Look, we aren't lost in South Africa. You just have to look at our banking sector and we can acknowledge we do make great strides. But how do we instill a sense of prosperity and pride in our people so that we can successfully market things that are done and not just things we talk about, right? So it's almost a state of flux. We seem paralyzed by this encroaching future, but there is so much positive that we could be talking about if that commitment to execution was really driven home. So I think, to sum it up, to market the country better, we have to embrace the future and its people, but we have to start looking at how technology plays a role in that. But not technology at the center, still people at the center, but how do we leverage the technology, not only as government, but as brands, to play a part in building a nation we could be proud of.
Right. So, Happy, let's bring it closer to home then. What, in your opinion, are a brand's responsibility? And this is a South African brand and their responsibility, and how does that affect the country as a whole?
So the responsibility of brands in South Africa is largely really about, if they wanted to, and they have a responsibility, by the way, to contribute positively to the economy of the country. But just to latch on what Joan was saying just now about, that feel-good type of sense of belonging, as brands. And my view is that, remember, there's no brand without human beings. It starts there. That is the fundamental issue that at every opportunity we get as proudly South African, we try and emphasize. Lately the argument, given the circumstances and the unprecedented times that we live in, and the pandemic that is, that has shaped that is changing the life as we know it. There's arguments from all, walks of life. There's arguments from all sectors and industries where people will generally argue, my industry is a lot more affected than yours. Media people will say we're losing jobs in the media space, which is the truth. I mean, just 2 days ago we learned, of the unfortunate situation at Media 24. It happens every day, every industry. The liquor industry will say, we can't sell liquor in restaurants. Our industry is affected the most. Cigarette people, manufacturers will say, unban cigarettes, we're losing. But for us, we want people to pause and to think about the fact that the very brands that we are talking about today, there isn't a brand without human beings. So for us for me, it's everybody is affected the same way. Therefore, brands have a responsibility to, first of all, take care of their people. Because for us, it's about sustaining the jobs that we currently have. In the midst of, the retrenchments that we see happening every week, joblessness, which then does not even begin to deal with social ill that we have as a country, whether or not we're dealing with COVID. Remember that the country and the economy was in trouble long before COVID. We were downgraded before COVID. That is a reality. COVID just made it worse. So brands have a responsibility to pause a bit and remember that behind those job losses and those industries that we all want to argue about, that we are, tourism affected more than whatever the case may be, it is human beings that are affected. It is households that are affected. And it is the value chain behind those human beings and households that are affected. It starts there. Because if brands don't have an appreciation of the fact that they exist because of human beings, then we have a bigger problem.
Nobby, so that's a good point that Happy has raised, because South Africa is in a very unique position. And we can't just look at the current state and read it as law and fact, but rather let's actually look at where we come from, what has impacted and affected us. So when you are creating content and campaigns, why is it so important for you to remember the South African heritage and greater context?
Yes, yeah, I think for me, first of all, our heritage is pretty much who we are, right? Who we are, what makes us, people, what gives us identity, right? And I think if you look at any South African whose brand is strong, and I say South African as in individuals or groupings of people, the thing that makes them so powerful is that they embrace who they are. So in other words, for me, the currency, and increasingly so, I might add, is really authenticity. So in any kind of campaign that we do, or any kind of marketing strategies, at the center of it, we must really be authentic. If you look at, let's say, people like Shoma Josie, people like Siya Kolisi, people who actually make us feel good about ourselves. The thing about them is that they've embraced who they are, and they've really kind of put themselves out to the world. And any success that they've achieved is because they realize, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to put out. These are my strengths, and these are my vulnerabilities. And I think for me, there is very much a strength, in that. South Africans, particularly young South Africans, right now are becoming far more. We are opinionated. We are bold. We are kind of like go getters. Nothing is going to stop us anymore. And despite the challenges that we have as a country, for me, what it does encourage me is the fact that we're becoming far more, cognizant of the fact that we need to be who we are, and unapologetically so. And so I think for me, that's the thing. So if we put any kind of campaign, we need to sell ourselves as who we are in our most authentic selves.
Look, yeah, I'm not naive at all, but it is exciting the way you framed it. It is exciting to embrace where we come from and what we're currently going through. And it opens up the door to so many opportunities. So Brent, talking about those opportunities, they come, in varying sizes, big and small, for each and every South African company. What are some opportunities that you currently see in the advertising space?
Listen, the advertising space has changed completely, and it's not in the last decade or in the last 5 years or the last year. During COVID-19, there is a new way of doing advertising, and obviously there's a new way of doing business during this pandemic. But to give you a prime example, there was a billboard company that we wrote about called Yoo-Hoo Media, who offered, because the businesses and advertisers had sort of pulled back. There was nobody in the roads. The lockdown had made everybody stay at home, and there was very few people that were on the roads. They decided to give away R1 million worth of free advertising to small businesses in South Africa that were battling during this pandemic. That is how South Africans come together. That's how we think out of the box. And that's how advertising has changed. And because they offered this R1 million, it was 60 companies in total. So as level 3 hit and people started getting back on the roads, they had these 60 spots that they opened on billboards around Johannesburg, digital billboards. And what had happened then is, because they had done that, every news agency in South Africa picked up on the story and gave them so much PR that their company has skyrocketed, that people want to deal with them because they've seen the heart of who they are. And I think that's a huge thing that's going to come out of this pandemic, is the companies that help each other will be the ones that rise together. And that goes for advertising. It's our game has changed as well. We've taken banners on our website and opened it up to charities and NGOs. They are some of the hardest hit. And again, we speak about different industries that believe they are the hardest hit during this time. Charities and NGOs, our pockets are getting thinner, and the amount of money that we're bringing in is getting less. So one of the first things that we do is give less, because we don't have that much to give. So it has changed, and the way that we are advertising has changed, and it will continue to change. And I'm excited about that. I think there's good things to come out of this.
Jean, what would you say makes South Africa a deeply innovative and resourceful nation, and how can we use that to our benefit in campaigns and communication?
Yeah, see, I think that's a great question. So I'm gonna pick up where Nwabisa left off, and I think that we need to acknowledge that innovation and resourcefulness often are a result of tough times, whether they be historical or present. I also don't believe you can innovate without being authentic, but let's look at what that means for a second. I think we really need to give independent thinkers a chance to contribute and add value, and not superficially. We can't say we embrace authenticity when it's Siya Sangweni, but not when it's someone challenging the status quo on something else. We have unique problems as a nation, and we need appropriate solutions instead of appropriating solutions. And I think a way we can do that with the people on the call today is deepening brand empathy. I don't know if there's a fear of persecution or a lack of commitment or fear of bottom line, or there's a number of reasons we can attribute it to, but South African brands seem to struggle to take a stand on anything, which makes it difficult to understand what an authentic brand in South Africa is. Even when we see anti-GBV, gender-based violence campaigns, they come from Carling, which is an American brand. So this empathy if brands displayed this empathy, it helps them become authentic and therefore be able to engage in the realities of our country. And then we can start to look at what do we have beyond property and tourism? What are the microeconomic views that we could celebrate? Eating at your favorite local restaurant, supporting your favorite craft maker, supporting a local agency or a digital transformation consultancy, and then tell that story meaningfully authentic. And social media is a great catalyst for this. So then you're perpetuating your marketing by being as you wish to be seen, which is the very definition of authenticity. So for me, the good news isn't about being the friendliest place in the world or these big sensationalist articles that we see, but it's celebrating tons of small wins that compound to build the national narrative. South Africans, we can't keep relying on irony and cynicism and then celebrating a World Cup every 5 years. That's not how we build a nation, And I think when I refer to that term brand empathy, I mean that unless we stand for something real and are meaningfully trying to solve the problem, we can't apply innovation to anything. It's just hollow words.
Right. Happy, Jean just made that Carling example now operating in South Africa. So global brands that have been in South Africa for so long, we almost get to a point where we forget they aren't South African. What does localizing brands do to the future of our country?
It adds so much value, to the future of the country. Localization is really the way forward, so to speak, which brings me to the point I want to make about the buy local phenomenon. The buy local phenomenon is a tried and tested method worldwide. We are not unique or immune to it, rather, as South Africans. Every country in the world has got their own buy local movement. You have to have it because you have got to assume responsibility for your own economy. And this is why you find that Americans will try and convince you how great their product is because they believe in their own. In South Africa, we still have a perception issue and a mindset issue, and that's a reality, and that's why we exist as proudly South African, to try and remind and educate South Africans about the importance of buying local and the importance of not being apologetic. And you're quite right, Siya, there's many brands that we can think of where multinational companies have invested in South Africa. And they've brought the skill into South Africa, and out of that, we've seen, many of the products that are locally made that have tested that have run the test of time. Every now and then we'll get asked as proudly South African, how is Nestle South Africa a proudly South African product? For us as a campaign, we don't care much about where the directorship of Nestle sits. What we do care about is the fact that Nestle South Africa has been in South Africa for the past 100 years. And they've existed many of us grew up or still have in our homes some of the brands that have been made locally over a period of years. Cremora, it's not inside, it's on top. I've just I've just exposed my age, but Cremora, Kit Kat.
You know
what I mean? Real Coffee, cornflakes, all of those products that we have come, that have become part of who we are. But just also to let on what Nabisa, please forgive me if I got your name wrong, but you touched on a very important issue when you said, when you touched on the authentic part, part of things, where it's important for us as South Africans not to be apologetic about who we are or about our brands, because we are unique and we are authentic. I always argue that the likes of, for example, the likes of Trevor Noah, Charlize Theron, Lady Smith, Black Mambazo, Zozibini, they did not go onto the international platform trying to be anybody else. They went on that platform demonstrating who they are as South Africans. And they are making it on those platforms because they're just good. They're good at what they do, irrespective of where they demonstrate their talent. And they're not apologetic about who they are as South Africans. And I always make this my utmost favorite example of one of my heroes, South African heroes, Dr. John Kani, who is helping us with our new campaign at Proudly South African. And you were at the visual launch, Siya, where a great ambassador of the localization narrative. And he was saying, when he was recording his latest movie in the States, he was in the presence of greatness, as you can understand. And he was saying when he got back home, his grandchildren were saying to him, were devastated that, he was telling them that for 8 months or so, he was in Hollywood, chilling with the likes of Beyonce and all of those guys doing their latest project, the book that appears just escaped my mind. And the children said to him, the grandchildren said to him, Grandpa, you were in Hollywood with all these people, but where are the pictures to prove it? And and they said, but where's your picture with Beyonce? And Dr. John Kani said to the little one, well, Beyonce didn't ask me to take a picture with her.
There we go.
Beyonce didn't ask me to take a picture with her. And for me, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's about local as leke, right? He must go there and be apologetic about who he is. He's a great star. Beyonce must ask him for a picture. Nothing wrong with that. So it's that authentic approach that we're making reference to. And it is the same approach that we need to have with our local products. It's very simple. What we are saying to South Africans is that if you choose to buy a product that is not locally made, a product that is imported, you're essentially creating a job and a demand in that country. It's as simple as that. Yeah. We understand that we are not, we don't live in isolation. We've got import and export issues that we've got to recognize. But essentially, if you decide to buy a product from China, you are then, creating a job in China.
Good point. So, Nwabisa, on the other side of the scale, though, there's this generalized almost anxiety around where South Africa may be going. How do we push this SA positive marketing and advertising forward?
I think it's partly what I said about recognizing who we are, affirming who we are, and being authentic. But I also think, see, one of the things as a journalist, one of the things that I love about social media, regardless of what the challenges of social media sometimes, is that it forces a very direct and immediate response and interaction with our audiences, right? Something that we actually never had in the past. And although that sometimes may be uncomfortable, for me, the best thing about it is that we get to know in real time what people think about the content that we put out. And so what that does, then it forces us to introspect, constantly all the time. And as a result of that, I think Brent mentioned it earlier when he said that he's basically seeing a media spaces that are becoming far more balanced. And I think that has been pushed very much by the audiences. So our audiences have basically said, if you are claiming to be a mirror of society, mirror society in all its aspects, not just the gore and horror, but actually tell us stories about people who are doing amazing things. And I think what then that does, if you go into a newsroom context, it says to me as an editor that we must be deliberate in going to find, to kind of basically answer your question. It says we must be deliberate in going to find stories, authentic stories of people, ordinary South Africans doing exceptionally well.
There's a lot of
things to talk about. There are a lot. So for me, I think to if we were to say to kind of push that marketing of South Africa is anything that you need to change, you need to be deliberate about it. So yes, of course, we've got a responsibility to show you the very worst of our country, but equally so, we've got a responsibility to show you the very best of our country. And I think those things kind of combined really tell what the South African story is.
So Brent, talking about those exceptional stories to tell, how would you advise brands and even young and coming professionals to use their social media to inspire while still reporting accurately? Who would have known that we'd live in an age and a day and time when the term fake news would be a thing? But what would you suggest in using your social media responsibly to be positive, but also being accurate?
So I think one of the biggest things right now, and we're looking at like 100 days of being in this lockdown, is that quarantine fatigue is real. And South Africa has become this like boiling pot of oversensitivity and people that are angry and triggered by many different things. So perhaps my first piece of advice there is if you're not feeling lacquer, don't post it on social media. Like if you don't even go on social media, take a bit of a break from all of that because it's not great for your mental wellness. Most importantly, and I guess the whole panel will agree to this, that if you would not print it on the front page of a newspaper, do not put it online. Like, how many times do we have to see this go wrong again and again and again? You can think your own thoughts and you can have your own beliefs, but please keep them to yourself and do not put them online if you wouldn't print it on the front page of a newspaper. Those are the two things. Fact checking has become everybody's responsibility. So owning your own piece of social media, having your own space online, you are a news teller. You are breaking stories to your followers. And people love being a newsbreaker. They love being able to say, oh my goodness, you won't believe what happened at the local shop, when they don't know the facts of where that comes from. Journalists have integrity and they source where that comes from. It leads back. We can always go back to a source and go, this is where the information comes from. We don't just find a tweet and publish it as a news item. That would be completely irresponsible. There has to be some substance behind it. And I think as South Africans, we need to also be responsible with what we're posting online. So yes, be a newsbreaker and tell those stories, but make sure the stories are true. And then you speak about being positive and inspiring. I think that is vitally important. Our social media spaces, when we started with MySpace all those years ago, who knew? I'm also giving away my age. But Sia's like, I don't even know what MySpace is. I don't understand.
Is it another version of the fax machine?
Pretty much. But we started off with MySpace and then we evolved into Facebook. And I remember a time it was the beginning of varsity when Facebook sort of launched. And it was such a happy place. It was really just people sharing good news and good things and family photos and connecting. When I went overseas after school before varsity, I would send a weekly email to my whole family about what I'd done and what I'd experienced and all this amazingness that was going on. And Facebook became that outlet for a lot of people where we could share our lives with the people we loved. And it was a really beautiful space. And somewhere along the line, we've confused it for something that it's not. I wrote about this the other day, but the internet has birthed this idea that we can be nasty to strangers without consequences. And it's a really, really, really sad thing, actually. And I think we all just need to check ourselves and make sure that and you say kindness is a very cliched word, which it is, but I think we all just need to be kinder to each other, especially online. The communication skills that we have, it's easier when you can see someone or hear them, but when someone writes a post and then a random stranger will be nasty or replies to that post, we have no idea what people are dealing with. Really, we don't. And I think it's vitally important to be kinder than necessary, always and mostly on social media. So don't print it don't put it on social media if you wouldn't print it on the front of a page of a newspaper. Always be kinder and understand that you're impacting the people that follow you. So if you want to be better and teach them to be better and make it a happy place again.
Exactly. Jean, there's a message here from Michael Brew who said, how do we get bigger brands to open doors to smaller ones and collaborate? Is that perhaps an opportunity for strategic use of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could be leveraging what's available to us to connect in that question, big brands to small brands. I don't think it's a technology solve though. I think it's an approach solve. I think the big brands or big companies need to be open, need to understand innovation and their role in innovation, and then need to enable it by backing it properly with the right amount of spend to the right amount of people with a set outcome in mind. So I think technology can enable all of those things, but I don't think technology alone can do much. I think it needs the right intention, and then it needs the right execution.
Happy, Themba would like to know, with print media cutting jobs and closing some of their media titles, what is the outlook of media? And how should journalism students feel? I know, Nwabisa, you can also add to this as well. I think you're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
So I think the digital space is the way forward, really, even beyond, and Nwabisa, you'll come in here, but even beyond this, I mean, the pandemic has forced us to pause and do things differently, but life has to go on. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting, having this discussion if we were not. If we didn't have a bigger appreciation of the fact that life has to go on and we have to find ways to let that happen. And the digital space is an enabler of that. So, with all these media companies, facing problems and shutting down and going through the repercussions of the pandemic, is that they've had to repurpose their businesses. In fact, not only media, everybody has had to repurpose their businesses. It's the only way
to will be the word of 2020 as
repurpose
well.
should be the word, absolutely. Yeah.
Nwabisa, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the reason why everybody, when digital kind of became our life, and everybody started kind of freaking out and kind of having the conversation about the death of the print, was really because we're very much invested in a platform, and we saw that platform as what journalism is. So there's there's a big difference between journalism itself as well as the platform on which it unfolds. And what is happening now is because for years and years, for decades and upon decades, we had actually built even business models based on a particular platform, which was print. Now digital comes, it opens the space, it kind of makes it democracy kind of almost free for all, and I think it kind of caught us off guard. And what it has forced us to do is to kind of really try to reinvent ourselves, keep the journalism what it is, because that is basically what our currency is, but understand the platforms, the different platforms on which it's starting to play out. So if I were to talk to journalism students at the moment, my thing would be journalism is very much alive, and it's something that is very much needed, is part of our democracy, one of the big pillars of our democracy. But what we need to do is to know what platforms are actually coming up in the future, and kind of invest in those, be willing to adapt in order to spread the message.
Yeah. Brent, how would you advise corporates to start re-looking at what they're currently doing in order to just have more of everything that we've been discussing this morning? If they want to be more responsible to South Africa, if they want to be more positive and inspiring, how would you advise them to start rejigging what they currently already are doing?
So what I've realized in the last 5 years is that corporates in South Africa, a majority of them, are incredible. Their CSI programs that they're doing, the way that they give back to South Africans is pretty phenomenal. What they don't understand is, and that I found, is that the stories they're telling, or the narrative that they're creating, is very much an internal comms piece. So we receive a lot of press releases about charity, about corporates doing great things, which they should be speaking about. But it's the narrative and the way it's written is all for internal comms and patting themselves on the back, which doesn't help people relating to those stories. So we need to take, corporates need to take what they are doing, and they need to humanize what they're doing. And we spoke about that at the beginning, is that at the end of whatever brand, whatever company, there are humans behind that. So from my perspective, corporates need to rethink about how they're telling the stories about the good news that they're doing, so that it doesn't look like an internal comms piece or egotistical. And that they also need to realize sometimes their good news is not everybody's good news. Like sometimes they'll send things and we'll be like, we don't actually care. Like South Africa doesn't care that you did that. And that's the reality. I think they also need to tap into advertorials, because telling good news comes at a price. And we speak about the death of publications or print, or what's just happened to Media 24, which is incredibly tragic. But it's because these publications need support. There's humans that work in these offices that are telling these stories. I mean, I often get Facebook posts where people are like, won't you just post this story so that we can help the people in Diepsloot? I would love to, but it also takes me like an hour and a half to write that story. And then I need to make sure it's the correct amount of words so that it can be patched up to the SEO on the back end of what Google does. There's so many things, there's cogs that need to come together to create the articles that go out, and those publications, those houses, those platforms need support. So to all the corporates out there, please support the journalists. The journalists in this country, the creatives in this country, the people that are telling these stories are incredibly talented. But unfortunately, we need your support to keep these publications alive. This week was incredibly sad with Media 24. I think it's 660 people's jobs that are going to be affected. And it's because they didn't have the support that was needed to keep them alive and to go digital and to move into those spaces.
But look, I see everyone in the panel nodding, so no one's disagreeing with you here. Jean, here's a question from Jesse asking, how can schools attract sponsorship from brands? Look, it's quite a particular question, but very evident that, if you are on social media, if you are a business, you are a brand and you are speaking to an audience. So even schools in this case, how can schools attract sponsorship from brands?
There's many ways that education broadly can attract corporate players. So there's the physical manifestation in being able to put a brand in a location, if the messaging and the platform is appropriate. But I think there's a more interesting way and a more scalable way to get brands involved. And that's in producing utility-based educational content at scale, and then finding the right way to deliver that. So partnering with experts out of IBM to create a robotics or an artificial intelligence sort of curricula, and then be able to deliver it via an LMS that's supported by a bot that can contextualize and answer questions in 11 languages and guide you through your learning journey. That's the way education or schools or whoever's producing that sort of outcome for society, I believe, should be engaging with brands to create expert-led content once, and then scaling it through distribution using technology.
Got it. Happy, in wrapping up, during lockdown, we saw a whole host of these beautifully shot and crafted campaigns, and they make us feel good, and they were telling us to stay home and stay safe, and we're in this together. All of these public service announcements. How do you design campaigns like this, but that also feel very authentic, that make the impact, and that also educates government and businesses and consumers on the positive but real impact on the economy and job creation of making buy local procurement decisions?
So before I get onto that, please allow me just to make 2 quick points on what Brent said. So Nwabisa, Brent asked Brent asked brands and organizations such as us to help the media, from a content perspective and support you and all of that. So, I want to make that commitment to you as the Sowetan, that as proudly South African, we will support. Let's have a sidebar out of this conversation, because we want you to look at us as the go-to place for great South African stories, great South African products, because we've got the intel. We know what great things South Africans are doing. And it defeats the purpose if we just keep those stories to ourselves and we don't share with the likes of you to share with the people. Mm-hmm. And then the other point, Brent, that you made is that of kindness. And that's a principle that I live by. I always say at every opportunity I get, be kind to the next person because you have no idea what they're going through today. Just be kind. And then just moving along to the question you posed, Siya, is that, and my take on that is that, quite honestly, us as a panel and everybody who's listening to us today, we all know someone who is looking for a job today. Even before COVID happened, we all know somebody who's looking for a job. If the unemployment statistics are anything to go by, the statistics that we know from a percentage perspective does not even factor in people who've given up looking for jobs. And I'm not talking about people who are lazy or just sitting there and have a sense of entitlement. I'm talking about people who are qualified, who have great skill, who are just struggling to find a job. That's how persistent unemployment is. And it ceases to be a government responsibility on creating jobs. We can all play our part in making the difference that we want to see by supporting local. So we currently have, we've just launched a new campaign as Proudly South African. And the messaging, which then speaks to all the campaigns that you are making reference to now, Siya. Yeah. Our campaign is very emotive, where it's not a hard sell. We are not saying to South Africans, do this, do that. We've been told so many times to do this, do that, don't do this. It's a lot. There's so much information. We must wash our hands, wear a mask, don't move, don't do this. And it's things that we have to do. But with our message, we took a different tone where we just, we know that many South Africans know that local is important. And we do know that South Africans need to be reminded every now and then. But for now, our message of buying local is very subtle in the current campaign that we're working on. Because realistically, many South Africans out there, they don't care much today about buying local. What they do care about is affordability. If today somebody has 100 rand to buy food, put food on the table for their family, and they've got 100 rand, they don't care where the product is coming from. They just need to know that they can afford it to be able to feed their family. So the message is very emotive, but it's just asking South Africans to pause for a second and rethink during this period and beyond, rethink our loyalty to local products and local services, to rethink our purchasing habits and our purchasing decisions, to rethink and recognize the fact that during this period, locally manufactured products have carried us. We have not been importing anything for the last 4 months. We have been living on local products. Now, local products have carried South Africans. Therefore, even beyond this pandemic, we have a responsibility to allow local products to carry our economy, if anything.
That is such a big point. And yeah, it really didn't resonate that much up until you said it like that. That will be my major takeaway as well, amongst many that have been shared this morning. Thank you for that, Happy. So in wrapping up, just final remarks from everyone on the panel. We're running out of time. And I also just want to start off with Nwabisa to share your final remarks and also pose this question to you that was sent in by Louise Hunt. She asked, how do you see the role of PR professionals changing to adapt to the huge shift in the media landscape? Your quick answer to that, Nwabisa, and followed by your final comment.
Very quickly, I think PR professionals need, like us journalists, basically the journey is to think about audiences rather than your own organization. So whenever you are seeing something and you want to communicate something, so think about what is relevant and is fitting to the audience, rather than kind of being obsessed with wanting to promote, we want to promote our own sort of organization. Because for me, that's how you get a wider reach. That's how, it lands. I think my final thought is really if there's anything, is that, you know, we need to tell the South African stories. We need to be able to adapt. We need to tell them with authenticity, you know, and really think about, as I've just said now, who we're telling the stories to, rather than, you know, what we believe is important to ourselves.
Got you. Brent, your final comment?
So I think we've driven it home about being kind and being kind online and sharing that kindness and sharing positivity with your own followers and understanding that you have these platforms where you can tell these stories, but you need to tell them responsibly. Because if you do tell a story and it does get picked up by the news, that's generally where they find it, is on social media. But just to what Happy was saying about buying local, and I'm going to add in there, is like supporting small businesses. We need to remember that every time you make a purchase from a local restaurant or a small business, there's a real human behind that doing a happy dance. It's not some big corporation. It's not an overseas. It's someone that really appreciates it and is able to use that money to inject it back into our economy. So right now, yes, the lockdown has taught me to go to the local fruit. I've got a local grocer that I never knew about, that's right around the corner from my house, that's owned by one person. And I've been supporting them because I feel like that's important, is to help each other rise. That's how we do it together. We rise together when we help each other.
Absolutely. Jean, your final comment?
Yeah, thanks, Siya. I think it boils down to, if we look at the context of the conversation in how do we energize our biggest brand, I think every point raised here today by everyone is incredibly pertinent. I'd encourage people to look beyond B2C and consumerism and buying and eating and shopping local, but you know, supporting local consultancies, supporting local consultants, supporting knowledge leaders who are local and have better context of local circumstances and are able to deliver on solutions in that context is equally important. It's great to preach buy local, but if we're still supporting multinational consultancies, then it's fraud. It's for naught, because number one, tainted reputations, but number two, the economy doesn't end in bread and blue milk. And I think we need to take that to heart. And, you know, if we're going to commit to building this, I know all of us on the panel, we want to see South Africa and the continent win. And I know that we want to be a meaningful part of that.
Awesome. And then Happy, your quick and final comment?
Is trying to survive and to stay afloat. That is the common reality for all of us. But with that said, how are we going to resuscitate our economy? And I think that's what the thought process should be going forward. How am I going to make a difference as a citizen going forward? So yes, local. We say local is lekker, but you know, we don't just throw that loosely. Not because we feel sorry for ourselves as proudly as South Africans, local as lekker. We say that because, and it's not an shame type of thinking, but we say that because we have good products, we have good services, we have affordable products that are accessible and that are good quality products. So therefore, we must buy local to create the jobs and to sustain the jobs that we have, but most importantly, to be the difference that we want to see.
Yeah, this morning has been so insightful, just for me personally, and I'm sure for our audience as well. So thank you so much to all of you, for you watching at home, and also our panelists for engaging, you know, just for a personal front at cliffcentral.com, playing in this digital space for the past 6 years and seeing the need that a lot of businesses and audiences are going through. We have launched our own agency, Cliff Central Creative, and to see and work with these brands individually with their trying to find solutions for them. It's so interesting how so many of these cases that each of you were adding in have been tying into this. So I think really and rightfully so. The bottom line here is we're all in this together, and so let's make it work. Let's make it happen. Let's push on forward. So thank you so much to my panelists for their inputs this morning. Happy Makoma Longeti, Chief Executive, Marketing and Communications at Proudly SA. Thank you to Jean Pinar, co-founder at Apex Media. Thank you to Nwabisa Makunga, editor at The Sowetan. And thank you to Brent Lindeque, editor-in-chief at Good Things Sky. A big thank you to our partners, Vodacom, EziAds, Everlytic, Proudly SA, the Media Shop and WAN-IFRA. And lastly, and definitely not least, I'll keep on reiterating this point, thank you for watching and engaging with us. Look out for more in the Paradigm Shift series by following Arena events. And let's keep this conversation going, man. Let's face these challenges head on as brands and marketers, and let's arm ourselves with the right information and tools. And let's constantly adapt and thrive in the future. My name is Siya Sangweni from cliffcentral.com. Enjoy the rest of your morning.